Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Toffee Blues, and welcome to the Everton Rant show, where me and Paul are going to have a little bit of a talk about some stuff that have gone on recently. There's not been much negative to talk about this season in terms of Everton. There's been, thankfully, a lot more positive, I'd say, this season. So, it feels a bit weird to be doing a rant show, but there's still some glaring issues, I think, and I think the problem is that these are very solvable issues, and I think that's what we're going to talk about today. But anyway, Paul, how are you?
Yeah, not bad, mate. Not bad. Uh, the result last night has dampened my mood a little bit. I'd be feeling better had Everton played, anything resembling like we have been. But overall, I can't complain.
So just to get straight into things, could I get again? I've mentioned this to Paul, and I'll be completely transparent on here. I didn't watch the game last night. I had other things going on. So when we talk about Wolves, I'm going to have to hand it over to Paul really here. But yeah, Paul, could I just get your brief thoughts on the Wolves defeat overall and us exiting the club cup? Because at the end of the day, the Carabao Cup, it's not serious to some teams, but then again, you look at the teams like Newcastle who've won it, Crystal Palace winning the cup. I think we're in that brand of teams where we desperately need some sort of trophy to lift, just to boost the mood of the clubs. So, what do you think about it overall?
I haven't been that pissed off about a result, I don't think, since probably Bournemouth last season. And that was sort of like where the end game began for Sean Dyche, wasn't it? And this it's not the same context. It's not as damaging a defeat last night as that was, but in terms of just fume, in terms of just really dampening the mood and getting the fans feeling like it's one step forward, two steps back. It's another one of those, isn't it? We were always going to rotate, weren't we? Certain players need to come in and show why they want to play for the club long term, or why they need to get some starts in the league over the next couple of weeks and months. So I did understand Moyes taking a few players out of the team and putting other players in, but I think the lineup overall was just all wrong. I mean, the most glaring one was Seamus Coleman going at left back. I don't think Seamus Coleman in 2025 should be playing in any Everton first team game. That's just my opinion. But if he is going to play, it certainly should not be on the wrong side of a football pitch, and it shouldn't be against another Premier League team. I know it was a cup game, but it's not like we're going to Scunthorpe, is it? We're playing Wolves, who are still technically one of the best 20 teams in the country, if you go by the football pyramid. So I didn't like the lineup. I didn't like the attitude of several players. I didn't like the attitude of the manager. And there was absolutely nothing to like about the performance overall. So, yeah, I'm very, very disappointed. As you said, we're one of those clubs that desperately needs a trophy. And trophies are not impossible to win. It's not like it's the same two, three clubs who are just hoovering up all the trophies every season, like you get in tennis or things like that, where it's the same people who win it all the time. Newcastle won a trophy last season. Palace won a trophy last season. West Ham won a trophy a couple of seasons back. Spurs won a trophy. Winning something can do wonders for your club, and I think Everton would take off as a football club if we won a trophy again. So just to throw one in the bin the way we did like that was just it was really really frustrating, and it's a big black mark I think against several players, and it's probably the angriest I've been towards David Moyes since he came back to the football club. As I said, there's no one's going to go over the top and say, "Oh, get Moyes out," or "Moyes is, a disgrace," or anything like that. But I would have thought David Moyes would be desperate to win a trophy now again. Now that he's had a taste of it with West Ham a few years ago, and winning a trophy with Everton would surely eclipse anything he did at West Ham, and you'd think he'd want to sign off on his Everton career with that. But he's just got his, I think he just got his attitude, his way of looking at it all wrong, and we have to pay the price as supporters.
Yeah, and I think it sums up these weird little mistakes David Moyes has been making recently. And like you said, I don't think they're anything major. But I don't know what it is. Is it this fear to go at teams still? Does he still? Because it's weird. You look at a game like Brighton, where they had a majority of the ball. We still end up winning in the end. The first game against Wolves, we've already shown we can beat them this season. We made it more difficult than we needed to. But at the end of the day, we've shown we can take it to a team like Wolves. So I don't understand again, I didn't watch the game, but I don't really understand the idea of it. And I think the Derby summed it up in the first half, where it was this fear of, and ironically, that fear of Liverpool helped them score the first two goals. And then when the gear switched, it was too late to do anything about it. And I do think that's from poor forward play, especially from Peto in that game. But I think in this one, it's just, again, I didn't watch it, but it's just I looked at the lineup and thought, oh, that's a few more changes than I expected. And of course, the one that does stand out is Seamus Coleman at left back, because I understand Asno's a kid and you don't want to throw him in at the deep end. But I'm going to be brutally honest, he can't do worse than a 36-year-old right back playing left back. And I don't it's Seamus in the last game he played at right back didn't look too bad. But you're asking him to play the opposite side of the pitch, which is completely different. It's still full-back position, but at the end of the day, your entire, especially with the way Coleman is, he likes to play outside passes, he likes to play it down the byline. If you're playing it on your weaker foot, you can't play it down the byline naturally because you're using your opposite side. So I think it's really strange from Moyes. A lot of the rotation I've got lined up here on my phone, I'm not necessarily against. Alcaraz, Dibbling, McNeil, Barry. I get that. I maybe not change the entire front four. Maybe have one of the settled front four in just to make it a little bit easier, especially probably Grealish. I understand you don't want to overwork the lad, but from what I've got here, he came on the pitch and seemed to immediately get fouled 3 or 4 times. Immediate. So clearly had an impact his first 10 minutes on the pitch. And we'll talk about McNeil a little bit later on, but I don't seem to understand this weird chopping and changing of not being willing to go at teams when now we're showing we can, and it feels like it's a almost a regressive mindset of still being we're one of the worst teams in the league, when I think we've already quite shown we're closer to, I'd say now we're at a point where we're closer to the top seven than we are the bottom four.
Just touching on what you say, why are we not going at teams? It's the way David Moyes is always set up as a manager. He's a reactive manager, not a proactive manager. He never will be a proactive manager. And even when games are desperate for a proactive approach, like that was last night, because the stadium was literally half empty. Wolves fans were protesting against the way the club's being ran. They look like they're in a spiral, and that it's going to take a massive, massive turnaround for them to survive this season based off the first few games. It just everything's going wrong for Wolves at the moment, and you get the feeling that if we'd have gone there and put a goal past them in the first 10 minutes or so, or just really took the game by the scruff of the neck and pinned them back, they would have probably just rolled over and died because they've got other things to worry about. A cup run is not top of Wolves' agenda for this season when it absolutely should be the top of Everton's agenda. And as I said, the atmosphere was really negative from the Wolves' point of view because the fans were staying away, and the fans that did go were probably not in the best of mind spaces because of the league form. And all the Evertonians, thousands of Evertonians who travelled down there, and to save up what was saved up, it was disgraceful, to be honest with you. It's not disgraceful losing to a Wolves team away from home. I'm annoyed with that, but it's disgraceful the attitude that was on show. There was just several players who looked like they couldn't be bothered, and the manager, I think, came across with his lineup like he couldn't be bothered, as if this game was a nuisance that he wanted to get out the way, rather than a game that, as you say, should have been attacked and looked at as an opportunity. So it was all wrong. But yeah, I'm so gutted about it and so disappointed, and it's just a real black mark against several people who I think have played the way out of the team for the foreseeable future now.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask you for specific names if you want to go ahead, but one thing I am going to ask, is it more of the old guard, in a sense of the players who've had these accusations leveled at them before under previous managers? Or is it some of the new players and it's a bit of a negative sign on them? I'm not gonna.
It's a,
Or is it a
it's,
mix?
it's a mix of everything. Like I don't think Coleman's attitude was wrong or anything like that. Coleman's just at the point where he can't play senior men's football anymore at this level against another Premier League team, especially not out of position. He's 36. He played he managed 4 or 5 games last season, and every time he played, his body broke down. So he's at the stage now where he really shouldn't be a first team squad member, I don't think. And there's other players who got an opportunity to impress and didn't take it. There's Dibbling, who's making his first start, and I don't know whether it was nerves or whether it was because he was playing with a load of other players who he doesn't know yet, and he hasn't formed any relationships or partnerships, or whether it was just because he was on the periphery of the game because he was trying to come in and get the ball a bit too much, dribbling, straying out of his position. So I don't know whether the lad just overthought it. So he didn't do well. McNeil was playing like he was spaced out on something. That's the worst I've seen Dwight McNeil play for Everton in a long time. Alcaraz, I think, wasn't the worst one, but Alcaraz, I thought, was guilty of, you know, not using the ball well enough. He went down looking for cheap free kicks that he was never going to get. So he made some poor choices. And again, I don't want to be harsh on the new guys too much. There was Barry. Barry didn't do an awful lot, did he? I think he had one opportunity. No. I'm thinking of dribbling. Barry got himself booked in a stupidly, which probably played into Moyes' decision to sub him off at half time because he looked like his head was going. It's a mix of players not being up to it because they're too old and unreliable. There's players who are brand new who, for whatever reason, maybe they're nervous, maybe they just don't know the teammates are well enough yet. They didn't perform, and there's players who've been here for a while who were given a chance to show why they still are important squad members who just look like they didn't want to be there. So
Mm,
it was just a collection of everything, really.
yeah, I think it's just typical Everton, isn't it? I've said to my friends for years now, when we talk about Everton, I've called us Charity FC for years now, because it's like if you're on a bad run, Southampton last year, don't worry, we'll pat you on the back and give you an easy win. And I just, it's like a stigma thing. I think it's like it seems to be no matter who's in charge. I think we could have the best manager in the world in charge, and it's just a weird stigma around some of the players. I don't know what it is. It just seems to be that there'll always be one early in the season. That game where we lose to a team in the relegation zone, no matter what the competition, where we should probably be winning quite comfortably. This one, we didn't win comfortably last time, but we've shown we can beat them. And wasn't it at Molineux as well? We beat them at
Yeah.
Molineux already. So we've already shown we can do it. Did we make it a bit more difficult? Yeah. But at the end of the day, we've done it. We've got through. And every football game's different. But you'd think looking at it, Moyes would go, well, I beat you. I don't know if that maybe went into his thing to make 7 changes. But also you'd think if that was him, he'd remember what happened in the second half of that game, where it looked like we were going to slip it. And I think we were 3-0 up, weren't we? And it looked like we were going to lose it.
But we could have been 5 or 6-1. Yeah, we were flying, and then they got a silly second goal, and it was a nervy finish. Yeah, but it was a free finish 3-2, but we dominated 75-80% of the game in the league.
Yeah. So it's really strange. And again, and I'd like to win the Carabao Cup, but it's not one where I'm gonna. Again, I didn't watch the games. I'm as I mentioned, I don't think maybe if I watched it, it'd have been a different story and I'd be fuming. But it's one of those where, we looked like off the derby that second half. It was really promising. I remember putting it in. I think it's annoying to lose, but that second half was all positive signs that we can go against the best team in the league quite comfortably, arguably the best team in the world, and take it to them and look like the better side. And if the striker play was a little bit better, probably could have won the game. Even from 2-0 down, I'm genuinely confident in saying that.
No, but
So
if we go back to what we were saying, mate, it's a mentality thing. It's very easy to play well when the shackles are off and there's no pressure on you. Yeah, there's a lot of teams that will think, well, to hell with it. Liverpool are probably just going to batter us anyway, so let's just go and have a go. It's the real test of a player's ability and the mindset when they go to these midweek games against Wolves in the cup, where you probably wish you'd rather be at home with a cup of tea. Go to these games and think, right, how much do you actually want to achieve in your career? Do you want to get a winner's medal? Do you want to go to Wembley? Do you want to make yourself a legend with these supporters? Because if you do, these are the games that you need to pull your socks up and perform in. It's very easy to just chuck it, and that's what a lot of them did. They just chucked it, and if you're one of those type of players, then you shouldn't be at a club like Everton in the long term. I know for the last few years we've had to kind of make do with what we've got, but if we're serious about being a club that just does anything other than battle relegation every year, then we need to get players with better mentalities. And I think a few players last night showed that they probably haven't got the mentality that we're looking for.
I think it shows in a positive way the impact players like Dewsbury Hall and Grealish have. Grealish specifically. These
Well, they're
players who,
winners. They're players who've won medals, haven't they? They've tasted
yeah,
success. They know what we have to do.
yeah, and it's like even it feels like it's them, really just them. Illiman and Dye's really good, but the lad's not really a winner, is he? I think he knows he's good and he's willing to take the game by the scruff of the neck, which sometimes you need. I just think you're looking at it, looking at the lineup here, we didn't have any of those players on. Dibbling, I guess, but I think that's more what Dibbling can become than what Dibbling is right now. And it baffles me, and I don't want to pick out this game for too long. And I'm going to pick out McNeil here if he was because from everything I'm seeing, he was the standout stinker
He was the
performer.
player
He,
yeah, he's the player who's come away from that with the most damage. Like,
so
yeah,
it's like
100%.
now, is that it? I've got here he's played his poor performances against Mansfield and Wolves only featured in 3 games, 156 minutes, two of those being in the Carabao Cup, only 19 minutes in the league against Brighton. So it's one of those where it's like he's not justifying his thing, and everyone will go, well, look at that run he had at the start of last season. I do think that's because he was the focal point of the team. And unfortunately, in a team with Jack Grealish, Keenan Dewsbury Hall, with multiple players who are just better than him, they just are. He's not going to be the
Simple,
focal
mate.
point.
Yeah,
And it's
it's
like
really that simple.
if he can't play without being the focal point of the team, then because it's like even last season, Illiman and Dye took his role, and it's not like he was getting loads of assists, but he was impacting the game. He was clearly good enough to be the best player on the pitch, and it's then I think ever since then, since Dye kind of put his foot down last season and went, last season it was his team. Grealish has kind of done that this season, even though I think it's been a few players who've performed really well. Um, is there a point? And again, I think McNeil's a good player, but is it one of those where he's destined to be a star performer for a relegation team where he can kind of drag them out, but he has to be the star man and can't be the second, third option without his head going?
No, I don't necessarily think that. I just think, as we touched upon, I think he's a good player. We've just signed players who are better than him in his position, so there's no squad place for him really. And it depends what he wants in his career. If he's happy just sitting on the bench and being second or third choice and coming on for 10 minutes here or there, then I imagine he can probably stay around if he wants that. But if he wants to be a starter in a team somewhere, then yeah, he probably is going to have to leave and go to a team that's probably ideally below us in the table. That it doesn't really look to do anything really other than survive or get to 40 points. So McNeil's an acquired taste. I keep thinking that he's the modern day Diniar Billy Electinov, who we had in the first Moyes reign, who was a similar sort of player. He was on paper, he was a winger. He wasn't particularly quick. He wasn't physical. He wasn't particularly skillful either. But he had a really good left foot. And he had a few games here or there across the course of the season where he was a difference maker. And he had a few highlight reel goals and assists, and like McNeil's had. But as the teams got better and players in the first 11 formed little partnerships, your Pinars and your Baineses and your Moraleses and your Kales with whoever the striker was in front of them in the number 10 position. As these sort of like players cemented themselves as starters in Moyes' first 11, it just suddenly became Billy Letson was just a bit of a luxury player who we didn't really turn to unless it was just the last few minutes of a game and we would just throw him on because it was just throw the kitchen sink at it. And Dilyar Bilyetsinov in the end ended up going out very early in January. I think it was like January 2011 or 12. One of those played for us for about, I think, 3 years overall. I mean, this is what McNeil's third or fourth year?
Yeah.
Fourth, I think. This is the start of his fourth season. I think he's been here 3 years, yeah. So I can see a lot of parallels. A player who, when he first came in, was important for us over his time. He's been a player who's scored some important goals and had some really good highlight reel moments. But just as the squad's got better, he hasn't raised his game, or he's not ordered to match it. He hasn't sort of nailed down his position at any point, whether it's in the number 10, whether it's out wide, whether it's a bit deeper and as part of like a midfield pivot, like a lot of wide players across the league tend to do when they get displaced. I think he's just a player who, as you said, he's got to be accommodated to get the best out of him. And Everton in 2022 and 2023, when we were just on the bones of our arse, we could do that because he would end up being the player who could probably be the difference. But Everton in 2025 and beyond, that's serious for getting into the top half of the table. I just, unless he has a dramatic turnaround, I just don't think there's any starting place for Dwight McNeil. So yeah, he's not. I don't think he's a bad player. I just think he's a player who, if you're going to get the best out of him, has to play in a very certain system under a very certain type of manager. And David Moyes is not that type of manager. And I think after last night, David Moyes is probably going to look at him and think, well, I'm not going to give you too many more chances, mate. You can probably go in January if you want.
Yeah, I think it's impossible for him because I think even if he's in good form, you know, if you probably pick the four best players off form right now at the club who are Pickford because, he's Mr. Consistent, it's impossible not to have him. Three of the four best performers besides Garner are the three behind the striker who start usually and die Dewsbury Hall and Grealish. And I'd much rather have him die on the right because I think he's shown that even though it was a worry for some, even though he did it for Senegal, he can clearly do it. Don't have a problem. Dewsbury Hall, although he don't run like Decore, works hard enough to play in that Moyes number 10 and he's much better picking up the ball from deeper than McNeil would be because, he can use both his feet. And then Jack Grealish is last month's best performing player in the league. And even when he comes on in the first 10 minutes against another Premier League side, he's making an impact and getting fouled for 3 or 4 times.
But I will say in McNeil's defence, to be fair to him, his game is his greatest strength is his left foot, is crossing the ball into the box for someone to get their head on. And Everton don't play that style anymore because Calvert-Lewin is there now. So our two strikers, they're not centre forwards who want high balls into the box that they can go up and get close to defenders and win. Are they?
Yeah,
And we're probably not going to score many headed goals this season from open play. We might get some from corners and free kicks, which I imagine is probably the only reason McNeil stayed on past half time last night because a lot of people were surprised. Alcaraz went off and McNeil stayed on for the first 15 minutes of the second half. I think Moyes left McNeil on for the corners and the free kicks, hoping that we could throw one in the box. And then when it wasn't working, he decided to throw Jack Grealish on. But when you haven't got a target man to aim for, then a player whose best attribute is his ability to strike a dead ball, he's obviously his numbers are going to suffer, aren't they, in terms of like
yeah,
assists and things like that. So yeah, I just think Dwight McNeil is a very useful player, but I think the days of him being a useful player for Everton are getting less and less because of a style change, because of other players being signed who are more versatile than him. And maybe, as you touched upon, he hasn't quite got the mental. I don't know this. I can only go off the evidence we saw last night. Maybe he's just a player who needs an arm around him and hasn't got the mentality of, well, I've dropped you. You need to sort of knuckle down and show me why you deserve to get back in the team. Maybe he's a manager who like needs the Sean Dyche type of approach because Dyche clearly put his arm around him and made him feel like he was important and he was one of his main men. And maybe that's the type of place he needs to go, a type of manager needs to go and play under again. I don't think David Moyes is going to take that approach with McNeil personally.
yeah. I don't think it's a mentality thing. I think he's just a confidence player. Ironically, it's the same as the fella who's just replaced him. You know, all of a sudden Grealish gets that arm around him from Moyes, where Moyes goes, "You come here, you get the ball, you do what you want with it." Looks like one of the best players in the league again all of a sudden. But I think with McNeil, it's just I think he is in a team where he could cross the ball, maybe not with Beto, but with Barry, the lad was, and he's still looks good in the
Barry's
air
a
this
big man.
season. But
Barry's a tall lad, but Barry's not a Calvert Lewin. Barry's not going to what. Barry's
I
not
think he
thinking
can be. I think the thing is though, I think and it's backed up. He's like what he was. I think he was the best striker in the air last season, numbers wise, of winning headers. I think they're not. It's not like Calvert-Lewin. I think he don't place them as well, is what I'll say. From what I've noticed, the one credit I'll always give Calvert-Lewin is he knew how to place a header. He knew how to put it into that bottom corner of the goal. He knew how to. I don't think Barry's got that placement yet, but I think he's got the tools to win them. But also, it's like when you've got a winger who's as good at scoring goals as Ndai, a 10 who's as good at scoring goals as Dewsbury Hall. Why fire it in the air when you can just fire it low across the box and then it seems like someone will get it.
exactly. We're not going to be a team that floats crosses into the area when we've got players like Grealish and Ndai on the pitch.
Yeah,
We're just not.
like you mentioned, I feel the crosses are more corners, set pieces because we float a lot of set pieces into the box, but I feel like that's just what it's going to be reserved to, and I feel like it's like you said, it takes a big strength from McNeil's game out. Ironically, Leeds probably looks good to him. That Nemecha fella, Calvert-Lewin, who he's played with before. Stack, they've got a load of big lads. They like to cross it into the box. I think McNeil would do well there. I think McNeil would be one of the best players. But I just think it's one of those where, like you said, I don't think he necessarily suits what we're doing now. And if there's a chance to get decent money for him, even if it's a loan with an option to buy in January, do you take that and go, we could probably replace him with a young player who can bed into the team, can be taught by Grealish, by these
We
other
can
players,
we can put that money towards a right back.
put that
Yeah,
money towards a right back and loan someone in to be the backup winger. There you go all of a sudden. So I think it's that where I just think his time's come to an end, and I think I'll look back on him positively because I think he's a good player, and I think we didn't. What did we pay for him? 15, 20 mil? Didn't pay that much.
yeah. It wasn't a massive fee.
I think we'll probably get most of our money, if not all of it, back for
Oh
selling
yeah,
him.
no, we wouldn't take. I don't think we'd take a snip on him. No,
Yeah, so I think it's one of those where it's just one of those. It's just what happens. And don't get me wrong. I think it's a very possible that McNeil says, "No, I'm happy being a rotation player," puts his head down, and then all of a sudden, next time we see him, it's a much better performance. But
hopefully.
hopefully, yeah, because again, he's a player I like, and I think he's a player who, even off the bench, can make a difference if his head's in the right place. And but it's one of those where that's up to him and that's up to the manager. And at the end of the day, I think that's something we'll find out in the upcoming games. Because I think a lot of the reason he hasn't played in the league is when by the time Grealish comes off, I feel like it's go defensive, drop back a little bit and secure a lead. I don't necessarily remember who he's been taken off for in the past few games, or if he's even been taken off.
I don't think he has. I think he came on against Leeds for like the last 20 minutes, but I think every other game he started and he's played the full
Yeah.
90.
If I have a look here, so Liverpool full 90, Villa, I think he full 90 does. Yeah, so he's playing the full 90. So it's not. I don't think it's a lack of faith in McNeil at all. Actually, I think it's more we can't take this fella off, and then we've got a backup right winger now. So why would McNeil go there?
Exactly.
So I think that's it. That's all the little things for this Everton rant show. I think it's much less of a rant than the title suggests from us. But if you did enjoy the video, please make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you for coming on, Paul.
No worries, mate. Hopefully, it's a long 6 days before the next game now, but we're playing West Ham and Graham Potter, if he's still in a job by then. But we're playing West Ham and they are absolute undies. We've got to be beating them.
Yeah, if we don't beat them, then I think the next
I
rant
really
show,
will rant.
then the
Seriously.
next
Don't
show
beat
might
West
be
Ham.
real ranting because that should be the easiest 3 points of the season, and I'm including all the promoted teams in that because they look by far the worst team in the league. Wolves might be bottom, but West Ham look terrible. But anyway, follow us on Twitter at Everton Newsfeed, and I will see you all for the next video and or live stream that I am on.